Alarms tore through the palace before I even opened my eyes. Red light spilled across the ceiling of my chamber, pulsing like a heartbeat gone wrong. I was already moving before the second siren sounded, pulling on my coat, counting the rhythm of the alert in my head. 3 long pulses. A fleet had entered the system without permission. I stepped into the corridor and found Empress Velthara Nixos already there, her guards forming a wall around her, her violet eyes sharp with a fear she was trying hard to hide from her own people. She saw me, and, for a moment, her expression softened into something almost apologetic. "Marcus, stay behind the guards," she said. "This is not something you need to see." I did not stay behind the guards. I walked past them, past her, and into the war room, where a dozen officers were shouting over each other, staring at a display that showed 300 warships dropping out of warp above the capital. The Korvath ascendancy had come, and they had chosen their moment with precision. The Empress's honor fleet was scattered across a diplomatic summit 2 systems away. Her council was arguing instead of acting, and I was standing in a room full of people who still believed I was nothing more than her husband, a harmless human she had married as a political joke. For 2 years, before this marriage was ever proposed, I had known this day was coming. I was not simply a translator assigned to a quiet outpost. I was the last active operative of a program Earth never speaks about in public records. A program built the day humanity first understood that the galaxy was full of empires who would only ever respect strength. My real name meant nothing here. My real purpose had waited 3 months inside a marriage everyone assumed was a joke at humanity's expense. Velthara's advisors had pushed this union because it flattered them. Marry the primitive human diplomat. Let the galaxy see how easily the Thessari Dominion could fold a young species into its court like a pet. Velthara agreed, because it amused her. On our wedding night, she had smiled, and told me plainly that she chose me because I was sweet, because I was harmless, because I would never challenge her authority the way a Thessari noble might. I let her believe it. Every day for 3 months, I played the role she expected. I bowed lower than necessary. I asked permission for things I did not need permission for. I let her court whisper behind my back, calling me the tame ape who had somehow charmed their empress. I smiled through every insult, because I was waiting for exactly the moment now unfolding above us. "Empress," one of her admirals said, his voice cracking. "The Korvath fleet outnumbers our defenses 4 to 1. Our reinforcements are 2 days out. If we do not surrender the outer provinces now, they will take everything." "We are not surrendering anything," Velthara snapped, though I could hear the strain underneath her authority. She turned to me, and for the first time since I had known her, I saw something like an apology forming behind her eyes. She was about to tell me to go somewhere safe. She was about to protect me, the way you protect something fragile. I did not let her finish the thought. "Clear the room of anyone who cannot help in the next 4 minutes," I said. The officers stared at me as if a piece of furniture had suddenly spoken. Velthara opened her mouth, perhaps to scold me for interrupting a war council I had never been permitted to attend as anything more than a silent guest. But something in my voice stopped her. It was not the voice of the man who had spent 3 months bowing in her corridors. I walked to the tactical display and released the thing I had carried, hidden, since the day I first arrived on her palace steps. Ember Directorate scientists had spent decades building what rested inside my body, a neural governor woven through my spine, designed using technology recovered from a dozen dead empires, and refined by human minds nobody in this galaxy had ever bothered to respect. For 3 months, it had kept my strength dampened, my speed slowed, my mind quieted to something that looked ordinary enough not to draw attention. I felt it unlock. The dampeners fell away, like a coat shed in a house that was never actually cold. The gravity plating beneath my boots groaned, as my body's true output threw off its calibration. Guards who had mocked my slow, careful steps in the corridors stumbled backward as I crossed the room at a speed their eyes could not properly follow. 2 of Velthara's psionic advisors clutched their heads and cried out, not because I had attacked their minds, but because, for the first time, they were feeling what a trained and augmented human mind radiates once it stops pretending to be small. "Marcus," Velthara said, and her voice cracked in a way I had never heard from an empress who commanded 11 star systems. It was not the crack of fear toward an enemy. It was the vertigo of realizing she had never once seen the person she had actually married. "You called me harmless," I said gently, because despite everything, some part of me had grown to care for the woman willing to learn, even if she did not yet understand what that learning would cost her pride. "I let you believe that. It kept your court comfortable. It kept the Korvath from realizing what they were actually picking a fight with when they targeted your empire, and by extension, my planet's place among the stars." I turned back to the display. 300 Korvath warships hung above the capital, like a verdict already decided. "Your fleet is scattered. Your admirals are arguing about which provinces to give away. Your council believes surrender will buy you time." I looked at her directly, the way I had never allowed myself to before. "I am not going to let that happen. Not to your people, not to mine." What followed was not a battle in the way her officers understood battles. It was closer to an unveiling. I reached the defense grid interface, a system her own engineers had once told me, with a polite kind of condescension, was far too complex for an outsider to ever understand. I took direct control of it, reorganizing its response patterns in under 4 minutes, a task her best strategists had estimated would take a full day of careful planning. Sensors that had been pointed outward in a defensive crouch reoriented into an offensive web, catching the Korvath advance ships in overlapping fields of fire they had not expected from a fleet they believed was still recovering from confusion. Velthara watched this unfold on the display, her hand pressed against her mouth, her violet eyes moving between the screen and my face, as though she were reading a language she had assumed she already knew fluently, only to discover an entire hidden alphabet beneath it. "How," she whispered, "is this possible?" I did not answer with words. I answered by boarding a scout vessel alone, ignoring the protests of her guards, and crossing the gap between our defense line and the lead Korvath command ship before anyone could stop me. Their sensors detected my small craft and dismissed it as insignificant, a decision that would cost them everything. Inside their command ship, I did not fight with weapons. I dismantled their neural interface network, the way a skilled technician dismantles a firewall. Except this firewall was a living, thinking system, a biocomputer grown to coordinate their entire fleet's movements as one mind. It had never once been touched by anything it could not predict, because no one in this region of space had ever bothered to study human ingenuity closely enough to understand what it could become when survival demanded it. Their coordination collapsed within minutes. Ships that had moved as a single, deadly organism suddenly scattered into confusion, firing on empty space, drifting out of formation, their commanders shouting orders that no longer reached anyone in time to matter. I moved through their systems calmly, disabling their long-range weapons arrays one by one, careful to avoid anything that would cause unnecessary loss of life among their crews. My goal was never destruction. It was to remove their ability to threaten the people I had sworn, quietly and without ceremony, to protect. By the time Velthara's honor fleet arrived from the diplomatic summit, hours ahead of schedule, after receiving an emergency signal I had sent the moment the Korvath ships appeared, the battle above the capital was already over. The Korvath fleet was retreating in disarray, their admiral broadcasting a formal request for terms, insisting the message be delivered only to me. I stood on the bridge of their captured command ship, looking out at the retreat, and felt something I had not expected. Not triumph. Not relief. Something quieter. Something closer to grief for a role I had worn so long that shedding it felt like losing a second skin. Velthara found me there, stepping through the wreckage of a ship her people had once feared, beyond reason, now silent and drifting under my control. She did not speak right away. She simply studied me, the way someone studies a familiar painting after learning it hides another image underneath. 3 months, she finally said, her voice quieter than I had ever heard it. You let me call you my harmless little human. I let you underestimate humanity, I said, because every empire that has tried to underestimate us has eventually learned the same lesson. We do not announce our strength. We survive quietly until the moment survival requires more, and then we become whatever that moment demands of us. She stepped closer, her violet eyes searching mine, no longer looking for the pet she believed she had married, but for the man now standing in front of her. And what demanded this? She asked. Your directorate, your homeworld, or was some part of it me? I took her hand, the first time I had done so without performing gentleness, without pretending to be lesser than I actually was. You did, I admitted. Not because you needed saving. You are the strongest ruler I have ever known, and you would have found a way through this even without me. But somewhere in these 3 months, pretending to be your harmless human, I stopped pretending I did not want to actually be your husband, and I was not about to let the Korvath take that away from either of us. For a long moment, Velthara said nothing. Then she looked past me, at the retreating fleet fading into the dark beyond her capital, and back at my face, searching it one more time as if committing every detail to memory. My court will ask questions, she said finally. They will want to know what you truly are, what your people truly are. I do not know how I will explain a husband who dismantled 300 warships with his bare hands, and a borrowed scout vessel. Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them humanity does not measure strength the way the Korvath do, or the way your own court does. We do not parade it, we do not threaten with it, we simply carry it quietly, until the day it is needed, and then we let it speak for itself. She almost smiled at that, though exhaustion and something like wonder still lingered behind her eyes. You have been carrying quite a lot quietly, Marcus Webb. So have you, I said. An empress who lets her court believe she chose a harmless husband for amusement, while privately gathering intelligence on every faction that might threaten her throne. I noticed that too, you know. Long before tonight. Her eyebrows rose slightly, the first genuine surprise I had seen cross her face since the alarms first sounded. You noticed. I am a translator, I said. It is my profession to notice what people say, and what they actually mean. You have never been as careless as your council believes you to be. I imagine that is part of why they underestimate you as thoroughly as your court underestimated me. She laughed then, a short, surprised sound, the tension of the last several hours finally breaking loose from her shoulders. Perhaps we chose each other more wisely than either of us intended. Word of what happened above the capital spread quickly through the Dominion, and faster still through the wider region of space, where the Korvath ascendancy had once been feared as an unstoppable force. Reports described a single human disabling an entire command fleet from within, dismantling systems considered impossible to breach, all without a single unnecessary casualty among the crews he could have simply destroyed. Some called it a myth, grown in the retelling. Others, including several Korvath officers who had witnessed it firsthand, insisted every detail was true. Velthara's council gathered within a day, demanding answers about the man they had spent 3 months quietly mocking. I stood beside her throne, not behind it, not below it, for the first time since our wedding. She did not ask me to explain myself to them, she explained it herself. My husband is not the harmless companion many of you assumed him to be, she said, her voice carrying across the chamber, with the same authority she used when addressing entire star systems. He is a representative of a species that has learned, through necessity, to hold its true capabilities close, revealing them only when the moment demands it. I chose him, believing I understood exactly what I was choosing. I was wrong about the details, but I was not wrong about the choice. A murmur passed through the gathered nobles, some uneasy, some clearly recalculating every assumption they had made about the empire they served. One official, bolder than the rest, rose to ask the question everyone else seemed afraid to voice. Your Majesty, if this is true, what does it mean for the dominions standing among the human worlds? Have we, without realizing it, offended a power greater than we understood? I answered before Velthara could. It means the Dominion has, without realizing it, formed an alliance more valuable than any of you understood at the time. Humanity does not seek conquest here. We seek partners who will treat us as equals rather than curiosities. Your Empress has proven, in these last hours, that she is capable of that. The question now is whether the rest of you are willing to follow her example. The chamber fell silent, and in that silence, I felt something shift, not just in how they viewed me, but in how they viewed the alliance itself. What had begun as a political joke, a marriage arranged to flatter one side and humble the other, had become something neither side had expected. A genuine partnership, built not on assumptions, but on the truth finally spoken aloud. In the days that followed, the Korvath sent formal envoys requesting peace terms, their admiral personally acknowledging that his forces had underestimated both the Dominion and its newest defender. Velthara negotiated those terms herself, firm but fair, securing protections for the outer provinces that had been under threat, and establishing new boundaries that neither side could cross without consequence. I stood beside her through every session, not as a translator this time, but as a partner whose counsel she genuinely sought. One evening, weeks after the attack, we stood together on the same observation deck where she had first found me watching the Korvath retreat. The stars outside were calm now, undisturbed, as though nothing had ever threatened them. "I have been thinking," Velthara said, "about what you told me that night, about how humanity carries its strength quietly. And what have you concluded?" "That I would like to stop carrying my own strength quietly," she said. "Not the way your people do it, hidden until needed. I mean, I would like my people to know exactly what kind of Empress they have, rather than relying on rumor and assumption to fill in the gaps." "That sounds like wisdom," I said, "though I imagine it also sounds terrifying to a council that has grown comfortable underestimating both of us." "Let them be terrified," she said, and there was no cruelty in it, only the quiet confidence of someone who had finally stopped performing a smaller version of herself. It is time they understood exactly who rules this dominion, and exactly who stands beside her. I looked at her then, really looked, the way I had not allowed myself to during those 3 months of careful performance. She was not the amused, condescending Empress who had chosen me as a political curiosity. She was someone capable of real growth, willing to admit when she had misjudged a person, willing to stand beside strength rather than fear it. "For what it is worth," I said, "I did not marry a joke either. I married someone who turned out to be far more capable, and far more willing to learn, than anyone in your court or mine ever gave you credit for." She reached for my hand, the gesture no longer performed, no longer hesitant. "Then perhaps we should stop letting either of our people define what this marriage means, and simply decide that for ourselves." Outside the window, the stars continued their quiet, patient watch over a dominion that had nearly fallen, and had instead found something unexpected in its place. Not a joke of a marriage, not a political convenience, but two people who had each spent months hiding their true strength, only to discover that the truth, once spoken, made them both far stronger than the lie ever could. The Korvath ascendancy would think twice before testing this border again. The Dominion's council would think twice before underestimating either its Empress or her husband, and somewhere far beyond the reach of either empire, humanity's quiet directorate would record another success, another confirmation that the strategy of patience, of carrying strength without announcing it, continued to serve its purpose exactly as intended. But for me, standing on that deck beside a woman who had once called me harmless, and now looked at me as an equal, the mission mattered less than the moment itself. I had come to this palace as an operative, with a duty to fulfill. I remained there as a husband who had finally stopped pretending, standing beside an Empress who had finally stopped underestimating the quiet ones, and discovering, together, exactly what they had both been capable of all along.